everybody, and welcome to another edition of This Week in Cleantech, your favorite 15-minute roundup, or so, of the biggest stories in climate and clean energy each week. We're recording this show for Friday, June 12th, 2026. We have a returning guest in waiting, Dr. Akshat Rathi, as Mike Casey calls him. Make sure you give him his flowers. He's from Bloomberg, joining us shortly. I'm Factor This content director Paul Gerke, joined again by Cleantech commentator Mike Casey of Tigercomm. Mike, how are you today?
Hey, friend, you're looking crisp and ready to go in this early morning taping because
Thanks.
It is, by the way, he is Dr. Akshat Rathi because he's a chemist, like a real chemist, not
like
these
Dr.
guys.
Thugonomics or something? Not quite that.
All right, so, hey, I want to give a shout out to our friends at the Invest in Tomorrow Coalition. You're seeing these mugs out here.
Oh, that's
Don't mess
slick.
with solar. And they've already taken Chip Roy's scalp. Chip Roy will be looking for a job. We can have him intern here at Tigercomm if you'd like. After his failed run for Attorney General in Texas. But this week, two other renewables-hating politicians lost their bids to become South Carolina governor because the Invest in Tomorrow Coalition played successfully there. So that's really cool. On the downside, I want to say we've covered a lot of E&E news stories over the last 2 years. We had this show, and its reporters have consistently produced really great journalism. So it is with sadness that we learned that E&E's owner, Politico, has decided to fold E&E entirely into the Politico brand. It's Politico's call to make. They're the owners. But in my experience, this sort of move rarely comes without an effect for the quality of what's being pulled into the mothership. I hope E&E quality does not go the way of Virgin America Airlines after Alaska Airlines bought it, Paul. So anyway, back to you.
That's a deep pull for a very specific niche of our audience, but those who got it, got it. And I, too, hope for the best for the journalistic integrity of E&E News. There's not a whole lot of big players in our space, as you know, Mike, especially ones that have legitimate punching power like they do. And I hope that we can continue to expect quality journalism from them moving forward. If you guys have an opinion you'd like to hear about or get onto the show or a story you'd like us to cover, 2 cents to spare, whatever, email it to us. We have an email address specifically for the program. It is twic, TWIC, at tigercomm with 2ms.us. All right, everybody, let's get into it. 5 stories this week. We start with number 1. Mike, what's on tap?
Yeah, even though Paul Gerke complains that he always gets the hard names, I get the hard names this time.
I saw this one. It was a landmine waiting for you.
All right. So we have 4 reporters from Bloomberg.
Give them your best shot.
They cover this. Francois de Beaupuy.
Beaupuy. Yeah, I don't know, man. It sounds like
I'm sorry, sir.
Marbles in my mouth.
Vinici Chan, Noreen Malik, and Coco Liu from Bloomberg. LS Power said to near deal for EDF's American renewables arm. This is a big deal.
It is a big deal, and we've been hearing, I'm sure you have too, Mike, that the M&A space is going to be particularly active in the second half of 2026, and that there are players, some serious ones, looking to make big moves. This would be one of them. LS Power, reportedly in advanced talks to pay more than $4.7 billion for EDF's North American renewable power business. The EDF unit for sale had about 6 gigawatts of solar and wind in operation in the U.S., Canada, and Mexico at the end of last year. Another 19 gigawatts or so in development. Deal activity in the U.S. power industry is accelerating. We talk about surging electricity demand all the time on this show. The biggest Silicon Valley companies forecasting over $700 billion in CapEx spending this year alone. The sale helps fund construction of new reactors in France and the UK, costing tens of billions of euros over 2 decades amid pressure from falling French power prices. Speaking of the falling French, how did the Knicks come back from down 29 the other night? Unreal, Mike Casey. I know you're not a big basketball guy, but holy smokes. That was a Victor Wembanyama dig. Anyway, Mike, your thoughts on this piece?
So, first glance, this deal works for both parties. LS Power is buying into the U.S. renewables market as electricity demand booms, and our second story will tell you why that's important. EDF is selling to raise cash for its nuclear program back home. Beyond the LS Power sale, EDF is pursuing a string of smaller divestments and cost cuts, selling assets in Brazil and China, trimming spending, and weighing a stake in its Italian unit Edison SPA. I will nostalgically say this could bring an end to an era. EDF has played a meaningful role for years on the U.S. Cleantech stage, and we hope a new owner expands its good work Paul, story number 2.
Story number 2 from an alumni of the program, former This Week in Cleantech guest, Mark Chediak from over at Bloomberg. Big U.S. solar and battery project lines up $3.5 billion in financing. When I saw this in the show, Mike, I immediately started searching for the release and found that I had not received it yet, but my good friend Mike Casey is going to make sure it gets into my hands, right? Because this is a big deal.
It is a BFD, and I will note that Cypress Creek is a client of my firm, but nonetheless, they secured $3.5 billion in financing for the first 2 phases of what will be one of the largest solar and storage projects in the country. 1.63 gigawatts of solar and 1.9 gigawatts of storage on completion of its 3rd phase. The project will be 2.45 gigawatts and 2.9 gigawatts, respectively. And where will this take place? Not Texas.
California.
Wrong.
No,
Okay.
not Texas, not California. Michigan.
It is Arkansas.
Wow.
Right? Conservative Arkansas. And almost all the steel will come from within that state, while the panels will also be 100% U.S. made from First Solar. This is a fast start for Cypress Creek CEO Kevin Smith, who said this is going to be a bit more than norm, these sorts of deals. I'm adding, as we go forward with deals of this magnitude and size, as we see demand in the U.S. for power skyrocketing. Paul Gerke, your thoughts?
Yeah, Kevin Smith not playing small ball over at Cypress Creek. He used to be over at Aravon. Justin Johnson, who's the CEO there now, good pals with him. The deal, the multi-billion-dollar deal that Cypress Creek got was underwritten by Barclays, BNP Paribas, Santander, and Wells Fargo. It includes tax equity financing. Smith said big deals like this, like you mentioned, Mike, are going to be increasingly common. They're not messing around with these small dollar amounts anymore. If we're going to do some financing, we're going to finance the F out of it. We've covered a lot of stories about the federal government being weaponized against the solar industry, but it's clear that if deals like this are still getting across the finish line, the demand for power is too great that any federal finicking is really going to put a spike in the tire of the momentum of solar here. So shout out to Cypress Creek, and excited to see this mega project come together. I hope it gets to its full capacity. That's an impressive nameplate capacity, Mike.
Yeah,
Story number 3.
Yeah, and my son Declan is studying finance in college, and I want him to make sure he studies the term "finance the F" out of this, because I'm sure that's an academic term.
200 level. Yeah, he'll get into it. 2nd or 3rd year in school. Yeah.
Third story is by past This Week in Cleantech guest Jack Ewing from the New York Times. GM plans to develop energy storage batteries as EV sales flag. Paul, your thoughts?
Well, the first thing I think of is welcome to the party, GM. This is a route that Tesla and Ford have already sort of forged. It just makes a lot of sense. GM's partnering with Peak Energy. They're going to start making components for large grid batteries, doing things like Tesla, Ford, and other car makers are doing as U.S. EV sales slow. This is thanks in no small part to losing out on that $7,500 tax incentive that was slashed by the Trump administration. But the grid needs batteries too. GM's batteries are going to be sodium-based. I've been hearing more and more about sodium ion-based batteries. They're cheaper, they're easier, the materials are easier to get. They don't require elaborate cooling and heating systems. A lot of them have longer duration storage. California is getting their first set of sodium ion batteries soon. This is going to be an interesting pivot in the space, Mike, and it's not just all lithium ion anymore. GMVP says the tech still needs to be refined, though. They're not going to be set for mass production for a couple of years, eyeing 2028. Your thoughts? Do these actually roll off the assembly line, Mike?
Yeah, I bet they do, because GM is a pretty big battleship. Once it gets moving, it's hard to take it off its trajectory, and they've been doing this a long time. That said, I will take issue with this headline. I do think it should have added a few words. The EV market was made to flag by moron politicians living in the ideology over reality world, but we dither. GM also said it would issue software updates letting some of its EVs send power back to the grid, allowing owners to earn money when utilities draw from their vehicles at home chargers. The company has already sold 250,000 capable vehicles. Tesla's Cybertruck offers vehicle-to-grid features, and Ford's F-150 Lightning offers similar capabilities, but U.S. utilities, which tend to be slow to embrace new technology, newsflash, have only run small pilot projects to test EVs used in this way. Paul, our fourth story.
I still think EV to grid is a big part of our future, Mike, but
Yeah,
I
man.
dither as well. We get to story 4, Julian Spector from Canary Media. This one's about the new Q-Cells news if you haven't heard about it. New Q-Cells plant doubles current U.S. capacity to make solar cells. We've been talking about this plant down in Georgia for literally years, Mike. It sounds like they're finally pumping cells out of it.
Yeah. So Q-Cells, you might have heard of them. They've officially begun commercial production of silicon solar cells at its factory in Cartersville, Georgia. It's actually a pair of factories, by the way.
Yeah, it's a big thing.
It is huge. The largest of its kind in the country for 5 years straight. The U.S. power sector has built more solar farms than any other kind of power plant. The U.S. opened up enough factories in just a few years to assemble nearly 70 gigawatts of finished solar panels, which is well beyond what the U.S. installs in 1 year. We will not compare this to China's numbers, but we will note that the cell production has lagged far behind, with only 3 of the U.S. companies making solar cells. Within a few months, Cartersville site will reach a full 3.3 gigawatt production across all 4 supply chains. Ingots, wafers, cells, modules in one L-shaped 4 factories in one facility, with a full output slated for Q3. Its Dalton module plant, Q-Cells, is going to use to employ 3,800 people in the region. Paul, your thoughts, my friend?
This was a big one. I talked to some folks in the space that admittedly weren't sure that this project was ever going to get finished. And I know that, you know, folks that have wanted to procure cells from it have been told more or less they're spoken for already. Another 22 gigawatts of cell capacity from other players is currently in construction across the U.S. right now. We don't know exactly how much of that is going to get finished. Recent additions are promising, though. Toyo's planned $357 million, 1.5 gigawatt expansion down in Houston. ES Foundry's push to 3 gigawatts by year end. T1 Energy's new fab plant outside of Austin, Texas. Separately, we talk about First Solar a lot. Their U.S. factories produce about 14 gigawatts of cadmium telluride thin film panels. They generate electricity without silicon-based cells, which helps with those supply chain issues. We could talk about this all day, but we have a guest in waiting. Let's not make Dr. Akshat Rathi wait a second longer. Mike, introduce our guest, please.
You know what Dr. Rathi is up to? I just realized during the show, he does not want Mark Chediak to be the most interviewed Bloomberg journalist on the show. So he's just elbowing his way to the front. But when you bring content like he's bringing, I don't know, Chediak, you're going to have to work a little bit harder here. So, Akshat, welcome back. In an episode where we might have called the whole episode the BFD episode, you're probably bringing the BFD because it's global and it's war. You had this absolutely fascinating piece, Iran shock jolts Asia and Europe to speed up the energy transition. First off, welcome back, and really interesting. I'm just, you're on a roll here with looking at the global impact of this hugely dynamic period of time and what it's going to mean for the energy makeup going forward. After this episode, what are you thinking? Like, what's your take?
Well, it's great to be back. And just to give a shout out to my Bloomberg colleagues, I'm on the byline, but so are 3 others. And
fair enough.
This global story is global because we have reporters around the world covering this topic. To me, this piece, which is 3 months into the war, was necessary because I wanted to look into history, and both like 50-year-old history, 5-year-old history, and then compare it to what these 3 months look like. And the comparison is necessary because we had the deepest energy shock in the 1970s, and nothing eclipsed it until this Iran war shock came along. So to me, it was necessary to see, are there things that we can compare? And there are. There are really 3 levers in an energy shock that you can use. Cut down the energy use that you have. Try and find fuels, if you have them, from other places. Or just become efficient at using them. We have those same 3 levers today, but in those 3 levers, now we have more options because we have in renewables a new form of fuel source that we can tap for really cheap. And in efficiency, we have the ability to electrify the world. And what we're seeing now is that countries are choosing that 3rd and 4th option more, 4th and 5th option more than any other in the world. And we show this through reporting on the ground in about a dozen countries in Asia and Europe.
Your story begins with a sort of snap zoom into the micro domino effect here, and an individual having to make the decision to fork over basically a year's salary to set up a home battery system to get ahead of energy bills. Those type of difficult decisions, while maybe not so stark as the one outlined in the piece, are being made by folks here and all over the world in response to this sort of shock. Akshat, in your opinion, is that sort of micro level what begins the larger change? Do these decisions have to be made by mom and pop shops that are trying to stay open, or someone who's trying to keep their lights on, and then that momentum sort of pushes everyone in that direction? Or are these changes made by the governments that choose to lend money to that individual mentioned in your piece that allows those projects to get online? Does it start at the top or does it start at the bottom?
Yep. So I will say this is actually really part two of the story. Part one came out within the first month of the war starting out, so end of March. And that was the goal that you were laying out, which is what are individuals doing? Because individuals now have the ability to go to renewables and to electrify if they have the money. But this is 3 months down, and the reason it's 3 months down is because I wanted to look at policy changes. And the example that you quote of this guy in the Philippines choosing to get solar panels with 1 year worth of salary is only because the Philippines came out with a loan program to allow that to happen. And we are now seeing that kind of policy change happening across Asia and Europe. European Union came out with this Accelerate EU plan, which is at the top an electrification plan. Immediately after that, countries started to come out with their plans. So we quote the France plan, which doubles the amount of subsidies that they were giving to electrify homes through heat pumps and electric cars, and to deploy rooftop solar. So it is really policy changes that will stick around, and that is also a lesson from the 70s. It was policy changes in the 70s that, really essentially squeezed oil out of the power mix. Like, to the extent where we would never talk about oil in the power mix anymore. That's how quickly it was squeezed out. Wow. And it was down to policy.
Okay, loaded question, and maybe it needs an entire episode of your podcast to discuss at some point. I was joking with Paul a couple of weeks ago. Who knows, 5 years from now, Donald Trump might be the most unwittingly pro-clean energy president in the history of the country. I mean, because of his actions. I guess I know this is a very difficult question to ask, but do you think that could actually prove true? Like, could the joke actually become reality?
I mean, I think it's a good talking point. Ian Bremmer and Ezra Klein were talking about this on their show recently. And, it makes for a funny take. But I don't think it's right. The amount of harm that comes from getting rid of climate policies in the US, the world's largest economy, and then going outside the US and undermining international diplomacy, taking down the carbon tax on the International Maritime Organization, that has deep harm that will stick around for longer. Energy shocks would have come around any which way. The fact that we are accelerating is showing what the promise of these technologies are to people now. It is a economic choice, not a climate choice. So as a climate president, not really. Maybe an energy transition president, I think that would stick around much better.
The unwitting adjective is a very important part
Doing
of
a lot
this
of heavy
descriptor.
lifting there. Yeah.
Just want to put that there. Paul, you want to take last question?
Yeah, Akshat, we're running out of time, but if there's any last thoughts you want to leave the listeners with, maybe something interesting you learned while reporting the piece, or maybe something unexpected that you encountered along the way, or maybe even a part 3 down the pike.
Well, there's a part 3 coming for sure, but let me give you one thing that I didn't talk about, which is I also looked at the last 5-year history. And what we saw is that we are coming across this energy shock right after the Ukraine crisis created an energy shock in 2022. And we are already seeing the results of the deployment of renewables that, Europe really went on a war path with. And that is the reason why power prices today are much, much more muted than they were back down in 2022. So Asian countries are looking at that and saying, that was the success story. We need to replicate it.
Yeah,
today.
I'm gonna go out on a limb, make a prediction. I am not a geopolitical analyst. I'm not a Middle Eastern specialist.
You don't say.
But just common sense would suggest if you don't mind killing 35,000 of your own people in a month and a half, you don't care about blowing out oil wells. And I think the Iranians, they might be crazy, but they're not dumb. I think they got Trump pegged as a clown and a knucklehead. I think they're going to keep this war going all the way through the midterms. And you mark my words, come October, people in Florida and Texas are going to be paying over $6 a gallon of gasoline, and they're going to lose their minds. Like I'm telling you, it's. I think we're going to see. I think the dynamics, Akshat, that you're talking about are just going to keep rolling and rolling and rolling in a way it's going to be unprecedented. So that said, I'll end my prognostications.
Yeah, we're going to clip that, though, and we're going to hold you accountable to it. We're going to put your feet to the fire when we get to midterm season, just in case. I'm just saying. I'll give you this soapbox, Mike Casey, but I'm not going to let you do it without accountability.
I need to throw in a number here just so that you remember. The 1970s oil crisis was created by a 5-month embargo from the Middle East on oil exports to the U.S. and a few European countries. We are in month 3, so...
Wow. All right. Paul Gerke, we could talk to this guy all day. We got to stop having him on the show because like we have a 25-minute episode every time he shows up.
It's going to become a 3-person. I'm going to get the boot is what's going to happen here ultimately. I understand how this goes. All right, Cleantecher of the Week time. Mike, I'm glad you did save me one tricky name to try to read this week. Our Cleantecher of the Week, Varun Sivaram, nailed it. Nice try, Casey. Founder and CEO of Emerald AI, if you don't know him. Sivaram and Emerald AI use artificial intelligence to let data centers flex power consumption on demand without losing compute performance. Very cool thing, very important to the spaces we're headed in right now with data centers. Congratulations, Varun, our Cleantecher of the Week.
Yeah, we want to thank our wonderful producer, Brian Mendez, who's not Dr. Mendez, and
he's also not here today. We got to fill in. We got a new guy filling in today.
And Alex Peterson and Claire Quirin, neither of whom are doctors, for gathering these stories, not Dr. Paul Gerke.
And shout out to Eli, who's filling in. We got to give him a shout out. Come on.
Yeah,
Casey.
man. Yeah.
All right. Hey, thank you, the listener, for joining us for another round of This Week in Clean Tech. Sorry for taking more than 15 minutes of your day. I hope you enjoyed the show nonetheless.
Yeah.
Thank you. Big shout out to Akshat Rathi for coming back in another episode.
Yeah.
We hope to see you again. You, the listener, you, the guest. Please subscribe, leave a little feedback, share a story suggestion, do whatever you want. You can also read all the articles that we discuss each week. They're in the links in the episode description. They also live in the post where this lives on factorthis.com. Until next time, be good, people.